A Birthday Message from Jesus and Me by Adidar Samraj, a talk that's found in the Fire Gospel and also this compilation, Towards a Radical Reformation of Christianity. As I said in the Knee of Listening, this is the other world. This is the spiritual domain. This is the spirit world. This is the world of God. God is not merely invisible and inside us. This is the manifestation of God. There are many other manifestations of God as well, but we must not deny this manifestation. We must submit to God in the context of this world and transcend it. To do so is our obligation. Our assent will not be final or true or free if we do not realize God in this moment and in this condition. To seek God elsewhere is to deny the Spirit presently, to deny that the Spirit is present, that the Spirit is the substance and condition of existence presently. To go within and seek for God elsewhere is therefore a form of sin. It is a form of unhappiness. We become happy when we realize that we are in the Spirit presently. Therefore, those who awaken through free spiritual baptism become happy presently. They are enlivened by the Spirit. They are liberated emotionally by it. They are liberated in their minds by it. They become blissful, self-radiant, manifest as love, happiness, joyous feeling, freedom. These qualities, rather than the dismal qualities of the inverted ascetic, are the qualities of the God-born, the Spirit-baptized, those who live in communion with the living divine presently. That is not to say that life in the Spirit in the world is not in some real sense a school or a trial, and a hard school at that. But it is a trial that occurs within the domain of God. It is a necessary trial. We ascend from it, but only by transcending ourselves and allowing the Spirit current to ascend naturally when the free conditions for its ascent have been established. Thus, we do not merely enter into this current to ascend. We allow it to ascend, we allow it to descend. We live in it utterly, submit ourselves to it utterly, and are purified by the happiness of the inherent Spirit of God. This way is not therefore associated with a problem, but with the inherent happiness to which we awaken when we are baptized by the Spirit, when we locate the current of bliss, the current of happiness. When we thus awaken, all our darkness disappears and all our negativity and our negative views are weakened. If we continue to submit ourselves to the spiritual reality, all these contractions, states of mind, states of emotion, states of the psyche, states of the body, states of relatedness, are purified and transcended, are purified and transformed. You must cease to be troubled by the mortal and self-possessed vision of life and enter into the Spirit. Be possessed of his vision, his radiance, which shines through us physically and emotionally and mentally and psychically when we awaken to it whole-bodily, fully and in truth. Such religion is free. It is native religion, God-made religion. Those who enter into such a religious process may live with one another, create a structure or an institution for association with one another and the communication of the teaching, but their religion itself is free and immediate. It is a process that is always intimate, that one can practice in every moment of existence, that one must practice in every moment of existence. It is not a practice to be engaged only sometimes in meditation or in weekly church gatherings. It is a perpetual obligation, but it is also a perpetual happiness. It is to allow your body and your emotion and your mind and your psyche to be converted by this baptism, this transmission, to be changed in your minds, in your feeling, in your bodies. Breathe it and feel it. Circulate this living force and grant your attention to the being that is self-radiant, the consciousness that is inherent in every fraction of existence. All this is arising in that consciousness. All the things that seem, all the differences are a play upon one force, one energy, one light or life, one love, bliss, happiness. If we contract upon ourselves, then life seems otherwise. Therefore, we must be converted from our self-contraction and locate the spiritual radiant in every moment. This is my teaching. In essence, it is also the teaching of Jesus. It is a kind of renegade teaching. It is not smiled upon by religionists and worldly people. It is resisted by the ego. It is resisted by sin or the effort of self-contraction, the denial of the spiritual reality. It is resisted by you, therefore, and I call your attention from yourself to hear and see this living being and to find this current. Awaken to the spirit, and you can see the radiance pervading the space of the room. You can feel it shining out of your eyes. Awaken to the feeling of it, and all negative and therefore self-contracted emotions disappear, and the emotion becomes radiant. Submit to it physically, and all the disharmony in the body disappears. The body becomes radiant and enters into a state of equanimity or balance, in which the circle of the life current is continuous, always being magnified, always purifying every aspect of the personality. When you enter into such enlivened union with the living spiritual reality, then you naturally magnify it or express it in all of your relations. Service is therefore not a conventional discipline, a means of eventually realizing the spiritual state, but the natural expression of the spiritual state. It is not possible to enter into the disposition of service or community with others and the ability to live with others spiritually until you awaken to the spiritual divine. Those who are awakened to the spiritual divine naturally do love others, tolerate others, magnify help and blessing to others, and become a benign presence. Such service makes it possible for us to fulfill the various obligations of life we assume. But because our disposition is fundamentally involved with the divine, our lives are fundamentally involved with the divine in the process of God communion. Our devotion to communion with the Spirit economizes our involvement with the world and our involvement with others. It does not in any sense make our involvement with the world and with others negative. It simply economizes the amount of time, energy, and attention we grant to the conditional states of life, so that we may be more and more profoundly magnified in the state of God communion. At some stage, therefore, we appear to renounce the world. Our lives become simplified, and ultimately we leave this world at death. We should have so fulfilled this process that, at the very least, at death, we will not return to this dimension. We will have completed this schooling and have no fraction of habit energy left over to make this particular experience of the Spirit worlds necessary. We must make this experience unnecessary through fulfillment of the way. At the very least, your fulfillment of this discipline should be thus effective. But even if it is not, and you are reborn in human form, you will continue this way. You will reconnect with this disposition somehow. There is no higher world to which we should aspire. Our aspiration should be toward the present God, toward a state of perfect identification with the living God. This disposition does not aspire toward transitions to other worlds, or a temporary transition out of this world and a return to it. The perfect fulfillment of this way is demonstrated through translation, or the complete dissolution of the habit energies of attention that lead toward conditional embodiment and experiencing. It is not by aspiring to go elsewhere that we enter into the divine domain, but by entering directly into the living divine, always presently. All aspirations move attention toward conditional states. In other words, all the motives of attention lead toward conditional states, except for the primary motive, wherein attention is dissolved in its source. That process leads toward the bypassing of conditional existence in all planes and makes possible direct translation into the divine domain. Lesser fulfillment of the way may lead toward embodiment in a higher or subtler plane after death, simply because attention has not been released perfectly into the divine condition. But perfect fulfillment of the way is demonstrated in translation, wherein there are no further transitions, no returns, no ascents, no descents. We enter into a state of sublime resonance with the divine condition and do not move from it, but awaken more and more profoundly into its domain. This is the fulfillment of the spiritual disposition. All transitions to other worlds are the products of a psychic intention, a tendency of attention toward conditional fulfillment. If we do not transcend the habits of attention relative to this world and the possibilities associated with gross human embodiment, then we will return to these conditions and be reborn in human form again, merely by repeating this exercise, which has no independent necessity, but to which we grant necessity by submitting to the self-contracting disposition of the ego. We must transcend all of the appearances of necessity that we seem to find in this world or in any other worlds. We must be free of the aspiration toward conditional existence and be full of the aspiration that is God communion. Therefore, you are called to enter into the perfection of enlightenment, the fulfillment of God communion, to the point of translation, not to the development of the psychic ability to ascend, to be embodied in after-death realms, the world of high yogis and great beings in the higher scale of nature. Thus, we do not use this baptism for the sake of psychic ascent, but for the sake of self-transcendence, the dissolution of all the conditional tendencies of attention in the spirit being, in enlightenment. We are not devoted to the conventional possibilities of yoga or mysticism, just as we are not devoted to the possibilities of being spiritual and blessed in this world. We are devoted to God, the transcendental condition itself, and this devotion, rather than any intention to be here or to go elsewhere, dissolves all the tendencies of attention. The way is demonstrated as translation in enlightenment. This is one of the principal distinctions between this way and the various conventional and traditional paths. The traditional and conventional paths associated with the first 5 stages of life generally lead toward the improvement of conditions for spirits in the spirit worlds, to an improved life in this world, or an improved birth in other worlds. The 6th stage of life is truly a transitional stage that should lead to the 7th, but in and of itself it is based on an heretical disposition and toward exclusive inversion, a problematic view of life that wants to dissociate from the conditions of existence because it is not spirit-born, because it has not recognized and awakened to the spirit in the moment of conditioned existence. The 6th stage of life should lead to the 7th, or the recognition of all conditions in the spiritual divine, which ultimately dissolves all the habits of attention. If we enter into the 7th stage of life most fully, we will not accumulate karmas in other worlds. We may see other worlds or become associated with the possibility of the transition to other worlds, but we will recognize those possibilities as they arise. We will not become involved in the psyche, but we will recognize the psyche. Therefore, we will fulfill the way perfectly in the 7th stage of life and not migrate after death, but be dissolved in the living one, allowing the living one to generate our destiny in its own domain. You could say, therefore, that my call to you is a call back to the transcendental domain, but that domain is not someplace else. You cannot get there from here. No roads leads to it. It is not up, it is not down, it is not within. It is present. We see it when we outshine what seems to be in the present. We are already there. We need only awaken to it. It is not like another place. It is simply not visible to us because our vision is qualified by the modifications of the spirit that are presently arising. The more we enter into the spirit, then, the more this arising world is transfigured to the point of being outshined, and we will discover that we have been all the while sitting in the heavenly domain as people awaken from dreams and find they have been lying in their beds all night. Because the possibility for translation exists in death, death is for the enlightened a blessed process. Death is for the enlightened a blessed process, a process of translation, ultimate samadhi, outshining the moment of the arising of the perfect vision, the moment of infinite brilliance, not of darkness and unconsciousness and all the weirdness we seem to feel may be associated with death and the afterlife. But we will enter into that brilliance, that clear white radiance, only if we have lived a spiritual life to the point of becoming perfectly resonant with the spiritual reality, enabling it, therefore, to outshine conditional existence when this body-mind comes to its natural end. The ultimate form of death is translation, or the outshining of conditional existence. It is to enter into the brilliance, the radiance, the bright of God, not to make a transit to another world, but to be sublimed and overcome by the blissful radiance of the infinite God at the moment of death. If we are still subject to the self-contraction, then we will withdraw and fall into the outer lights of the cosmic mandala, into the spirit worlds, gravitating back to those conditions toward which our habits of attention gravitate. Those who fulfill the spiritual way perfectly outshine all worlds at the point of death and enter into the divine domain represented in the cosmic mandala by the central white brightness, what is called the clear white light in the Tantric Buddhist tradition, represented in the visualized sphere of lights as a white star. The cosmos manifested in the spirit may be seen as a sphere of lights, a system of concentric circles, at the outer reaches of which is reddishness and golden yellow, then a moonlight whiteness, then a brilliant blue, and at the centre a white star. When we enter into the white star, we enter an infinite place of outshining radiance, the divine domain. Yogis make much of the other lights, but all the other lights are associated with conditional existence. Higher realms appear in the blue field, but they are not the divine domain. They represent conditional possibilities of the manifest ego, and most human beings will gravitate toward the lesser lights, the outer field, toward grossness, the etheric and lower astral planes, re-embodiment in human form. But by living a spiritual life, by becoming spiritualized through God communion, we enter into that disposition that ultimately outshines all conditional realms. Therefore, death in its perfect form is translation into the divine domain beyond all the lights. Translation is the perfect fulfillment of this way. It is the last stage of the way. The way begins with hearing and seeing, understanding the self-contraction, repenting of it, moving beyond it, and seeing or locating the Spirit of God, which is transmitted in the company of the spiritual master, and thereafter found in all times and places by maintaining that communion constantly and submitting to the discipline of the adept. When the baptizing power is contacted, it is felt as a pleasurable force enveloping and pervading the body. It may be felt to be shining through the eyes. It creates the melting sensation in the heart of the emotional being. It creates feelings of the movement of energy in the body. As we enter into the life of communion with that which we locate through baptism, then we enter into a process in life and meditation wherein we are purified. All of the chronic tendencies, physical, emotional, mental, and psychic, are brought to the surface, to some degree lived through, struggled with in spiritual terms, eventually transcended. The way is the entire process, not merely meditative enjoyments. You must appreciate that the way involves these purifications, and that we must be actively involved in submission to the spiritual divine in the context of our limitations. We grant more force to this purification through our meditation. We not only experience pleasurable meditative conditions, but by opening in the process of meditation, we liberate more energy into our daily lives and consequently experience more of the purifying difficulties, perhaps, as well as signs of blessing and enjoyments in life. Then, in the meditative process, in the circles of conductivity and the conscious process, all kinds of physical and emotional and mental and psychic changes develop. As they arise, we must not become attached to them, cling to them, and become self-contracted in the basis of them, but we must continue to submit ourselves into the process of conductivity and direct attention into the disciplines of the conscious process. Thus, do we always go beyond or become purified of our meditative enjoyments? Whatever arises is the garbage of the goddess. There are simply modifications of the spirit. We must continue our practice and not become distracted by them. We must relate to them naturally and persist in the essential disciplines. All the spiritual and meditative experiences and the experiences of ordinary life described in the esoteric traditions are potential in this way, and may be experienced at one time or another by devotees. But the thrust of our practice is in the conscious process toward which we are liberated through our discipline. In every moment of our practice, we free attention and energy from the habits of the self-contraction. Therefore, we can practice the conscious process perhaps in the form of true prayer, or perhaps in the form of inquiry and recognition, or the forms of the perfect practice. Ultimately, the perfect practice is fulfilled in the awakening to Sahaj Samadhi and self-abiding recognition of the seventh stage of life, which becomes transfiguration, transformation, indifference or motiveless renunciation, and translation or unconditional nirvikalpa samadhi, which is ultimate rebirth into the divine domain. The purpose of all the gatherings of devotees is to consider the teaching to the point of hearing or self-understanding, and to grant attention to the spiritual master in the forms of his person, his agencies, and his spirit blessing, magnified to devotees to the point of the tangible awakening to an acknowledgement of the spiritual divine. This entire institution and this whole community of devotees should be devoted to these purposes. Practice daily, gather constantly for the sake of hearing and seeing and communicating to one another about actual hearing and seeing. Tell the stories of your practice, support one another's awakening, give one another opportunity for the demonstration of the way in good company, and call everyone to the real discipline and technical practice of this esoteric way, this radical way in divine communion, in daily life. Do this as individuals, and do this as a gathering, a community, and an institution, and you will see the fruits of my birth and of your own birth. Then this institution and this community will be unique and will have great value. They will be real. They will grow. They will stop stumbling and falling back. It all depends on true hearing, self-understanding, and the acceptance of this baptism. November 1982. Da.